It was raining the night the devil found his conscience. A 6-year-old girl, soaked in mud and absolute terror, burst into the most exclusive, heavily guarded private club in New York City. She didn't care about the guns, the guards, or the smoke. She just screamed one sentence that stopped the music cold. "They're killing her!" Most men in that room would have thrown her out. But Lorenzo Moretti wasn't most men. He was the king of the city. And what he did next didn't just break the underworld's code. It started a war that burned half the city to the ground. You think you know Mafia romances? Wait until you hear the true story of the night of the red rain. The rain in New York doesn't wash the streets clean. It just makes the grime slicker. Inside the Onyx room, however, the weather was irrelevant. The air smelled of aged mahogany, Cohiba cigars, and fear. Lorenzo Moretti sat at the head of a table that cost more than most people's houses, swirling a glass of amber whiskey. He was 32, with eyes the color of cold espresso, and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a childhood that ended too soon. Across from him sat Councilman Bill Henderson, a man whose sweat was beginning to stain his expensive Italian collar. "Lorenzo, please," Henderson stammered, his hands shaking. "The zoning permits. They're taking time. The mayor is watching everyone right now." Lorenzo didn't blink. He just set his glass down. The sound, though soft, echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "I don't pay you for excuses, Bill. I pay you for pavement. I want ground broken on the waterfront project by Friday, or I break you." The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the front of the club slammed open. The bouncers, massive men named Rocco and Tiny, moved instantly. They were professionals. No one got into the Onyx without an invite. But they hesitated, because the intruder wasn't a hitman. It wasn't a cop. It was a child. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her pink coat was torn and covered in black street sludge. Her hair was plastered to her skull by the rain, and her chest was heaving so hard it looked like it might crack her ribs. She looked like a ghost that had crawled out of a storm drain. "Hey, kid, you can't be in here," Rocco barked, stepping forward, his hand instinctively reaching out to grab her arm. The girl didn't shrink away. She dodged him, sprinting into the center of the room, her eyes scanning the terrifying faces of the city's most dangerous men until they locked onto Lorenzo. Maybe she sensed the power radiating off him. Maybe it was just luck. She ran straight to the head of the table. Henderson gasped, recoiling as if she were contagious. Lorenzo held up a hand. "Stop." Rocco froze. The room went deathly silent. The little girl grabbed the lapel of Lorenzo's $3,000 custom suit with her muddy hands. She was trembling so violently her teeth chattered. "Please," she wheezed, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "Please, mister. You look big. You look scary." Lorenzo looked down at the muddy hand stains on his silk suit. Then he looked into the girl's eyes. They were blue, terrified, piercing blue. "I am scary, Piccola," Lorenzo said, his voice a low rumble. "How did you get past the gate?" "I squeezed through the bars," she cried, pointing back toward the door. "My sister, Bella, she told me to run. She said run to the big lights. Who is chasing you?" "The bad men," she screamed, her voice breaking. "They have bats. They're beating her. In the alley behind the dumpster. She's not moving anymore. Please," Henderson scoffed, standing up. "Lorenzo, this is ridiculous. Call the police or throw the brat out. We have business." Lorenzo slowly turned his head to Henderson. The look in his eyes made the councilman sit back down instantly, his mouth snapping shut. Lorenzo stood up. He towered over the table. He took off his suit jacket, not caring about the mud, and draped it over the shivering girl's shoulders. It swallowed her whole. "Rocco," Lorenzo said quietly, "my gun." Rocco unholstered a matte black 1911 and handed it to his boss, handle first. Lorenzo checked the chamber. "Show me," Lorenzo said to the girl. She grabbed his hand, her tiny, freezing fingers wrapping around his massive, scarred ones, and pulled him towards the door. They burst out into the pouring rain. The girl led him around the corner of the club, down a narrow service alley that smelled of rotting vegetables and gasoline. Lorenzo heard the sound before he saw them, the sickening, wet thud of wood hitting flesh. And laughter. 3 men. They were wearing generic streetwear, hoods up. One was winding up for another swing with a baseball bat. On the ground, curled into a fetal ball, was a woman. She was motionless, her white waitress uniform stained crimson. "That's enough," the man with the bat laughed. "Lesson learned, bitch. Next time, have the money." "Hey!" Lorenzo's voice wasn't a shout. It was a thunderclap. The 3 men spun around. The one with the bat sneered. He didn't recognize Lorenzo in the dark and rain. "Walk away, pal. This ain't your business, unless you want to bleed too." Lorenzo let go of the little girl's hand. "Sophie," he said, guessing a name, or maybe just using a soft tone. "Close your eyes and cover your ears. Count to 10. The girl, Sophie, obeyed instantly. She pressed her hands over her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. Lorenzo walked forward. He didn't run. He stalked. "Who the hell are you?" the thug shouted, raising the bat. Lorenzo didn't answer. When the thug swung, Lorenzo stepped inside the arc with terrifying speed. He caught the bat mid-swing with his left hand, the wood cracking under his grip. With his right hand, he drove the butt of the pistol into the man's temple. The sound was like a melon dropping on concrete. The man dropped instantly. The other 2 panicked. One reached for a knife. Lorenzo shot him in the kneecap. The man screamed, collapsing into the mud. The 3rd man, the leader, scrambled back, tripping over the woman's body. "Do you know who we work for? We're with O'Malley. You're dead. You're—" Lorenzo stood over him, the rain dripping off the barrel of his gun. "O'Malley is a bottom feeder. Tell him Lorenzo Moretti sends his regards." He kicked the man in the jaw, knocking him cold. Silence returned to the alley, save for the rain and the sobbing of the man with the shattered knee. Lorenzo holstered his weapon and knelt in the mud beside the woman. He gently turned her over. Her face was a mess of bruises, one eye swollen shut, her lips split wide open. But beneath the blood, Lorenzo felt a jolt in his chest he hadn't felt in 10 years. She was beautiful, even broken. She had a fierce, defiant set to her jaw. She groaned, her eyes fluttering open, one green eye focused on him. "Sophie," she whispered, blood bubbling past her lips. Did she get away?" Lorenzo brushed a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "She's safe. She's with me." "Who?" She coughed, wincing in agony. "Who are you?" "I'm the monster that eats the other monsters," Lorenzo murmured. He scooped her up into his arms effortlessly. She was light, too thin. Sophie unplugged her ears and ran over, grabbing Lorenzo's leg. "Is she dead? Is Bella dead?" "No," Lorenzo said firmly, standing up with Bella in his arms. "But we need to go. Now." He marched back towards the club, Rocco and his security team finally arriving at the alley entrance, guns drawn. "Boss?" Rocco asked, eyeing the carnage. "Clean this up," Lorenzo ordered, his voice ice cold. "Leave the one with the broken knee alive. I want to know exactly who sent them. Then bring the car around. We're going to the estate." "The estate, boss? You never take strangers to the estate." Lorenzo looked down at the woman in his arms, her head resting against his chest, her breathing shallow. "She's not a stranger," Lorenzo said, though he didn't know why he felt it. "She's my responsibility now." The Moretti estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion, located in the hills of Palisades, overlooking the Hudson River. It had 12 bedrooms, a wine cellar worth millions, and a medical bay better equipped than most city hospitals. Lorenzo paced the hallway outside the guest room, a lit cigarette in his hand that he hadn't taken a drag from in 10 minutes. The door opened, and Dr. Aris, a grey-haired man who had stitched up more bullet holes than he cared to count, stepped out. He looked tired. "Well?" Lorenzo asked, crushing the unsmoked cigarette in a crystal ashtray. "She's lucky, Enzo," Aris said, wiping his hands on a towel. 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, mild concussion and severe bruising, but no internal bleeding. She's malnourished, though, overworked. She needs rest, not just healing. And the girl? Sleeping in the room next to her. The maids gave her a warm bath and some food. She's a brave little thing. She wouldn't eat until I promised her sister was alive. Lorenzo nodded, a tightness in his jaw relaxing slightly. Can I see her? The woman? She's awake, groggy from the painkillers, but awake. She's asking for you. Lorenzo adjusted his cuffs and walked into the room. It smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Bella, was propped up against a mountain of pillows. Her face seemed so was a palette of purple and blue, but her eyes were alert. They widened when he entered. You, she rasped. Her voice was scratchy. Lorenzo pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. Me. Where is Sophie? Next door. Sleeping like a rock. I have 2 guards outside her door and 1 at the window. The president isn't as safe as your sister right now. Bella let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. Her shoulders slumped. Then she looked at him with renewed suspicion. Why did you help us? I know who you are. I saw your face on the news. You're Lorenzo Moretti. They call you the King of New York. Some call me worse, Lorenzo admitted, and I helped you because your sister has more guts than half the men on my payroll. She ran into a lion's den to save you. Bella looked down at her bandaged hands. I can't pay you. I don't have money. That's why those men were there. I don't want your money, Isabella. Then what do you want? She met his gaze, defiance flashing through the pain. Men like you always want something. Lorenzo leaned forward. The air between them crackled. I want to know why Declan O'Malley's low-level thugs are beating a waitress to death in an alley for a debt that looks like it couldn't be more than $5,000. Bella flinched at the name O'Malley. It's not my debt, she whispered, tears welling up. It was my father's. He had a gambling problem. He borrowed $10,000 from O'Malley's loan sharks 3 years ago. He died of a heart attack last year. I thought the debt died with him. Debts to the Irish mob never die, Lorenzo said softly. They inherit. They raised the interest, Bella continued, her voice trembling. They said I owe them $50,000 now. I work double shifts at the diner. I clean houses on weekends. It's never enough. Today, they said time was up. They said if I didn't pay, they'd take Sophie. Lorenzo's fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. The idea of anyone touching the little girl who had stormed his club made his blood boil. It was an unfamiliar protective instinct, primal and dangerous. They won't touch Sophie, Lorenzo said. It was a vow. You can't stop them, Bella cried softly. O'Malley is powerful. If I stay here, I put you in danger. Lorenzo actually laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. Isabella, look around you. I am the danger. O'Malley is a nuisance. I am the solution. He stood up, his presence filling the room. You and Sophie stay here, until you are healed, until I say it's safe. I can't accept charity, she argued, trying to sit up but wincing. It's not charity, Lorenzo said, walking to the door. He paused, his hand on the brass handle. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. Consider it an investment. I hate messy alleys near my club. It's bad for business. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Lorenzo walked out, closing the door softly. Rocco was waiting in the hall. Boss, Rocco said, holding out a tablet. We got the info from the guy with the shattered knee before he passed out. It's worse than just a gambling debt. Lorenzo took the tablet. Talk to me. The debt is real, but that's not why they were beating her. O'Malley doesn't send 3 guys for a waitress over $50,000. He sends 1 guy to break a thumb. So why were they there? Because of where her father worked before he died, Rocco said grimly. Her old man was the accountant for the docks, the union records. Rumor is, before he died, he stole a ledger that proves O'Malley is trafficking fentanyl through the cargo ports. O'Malley thinks Bella has it. Lorenzo looked at the closed door of the bedroom. The stakes had just shifted. Bella wasn't just a victim. She was the key to taking down his biggest rival. But looking at that door, Lorenzo realized something terrifying. He didn't care about the ledger. He wanted to burn O'Malley's world down simply because he had bruised her face. "Rocco," Lorenzo commanded, "triple the guard, and get the car ready." "Where are we going, boss? It's 3 a.m. Lorenzo checked his gun. "We're going to pay Mr. O'Malley a visit. I want to return his baseball bat." South Boston, or the Irish Riviera, as the locals called the mob-controlled blocks, was a different world from Lorenzo's sleek Manhattan skyline. Here the streetlights were broken, and the silence was heavy with watchful eyes. It was 4:15 a.m. when Lorenzo's convoy, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, rolled to a stop outside the Shamrock, a dive bar that served as the front for Declan O'Malley's operation. "Stay in the car," Lorenzo told the driver. "Rocco, you and Leo are with me. No guns unless they draw first. I want to send a message, not start a massacre. Yet." Rocco nodded, cracking his knuckles. He was still carrying the baseball bat they had recovered from the alleyway. They walked to the door. It was locked. Lorenzo didn't bother knocking. He stepped back and kicked the heavy oak door right below the lock mechanism. Wood splintered with a deafening crack, and the door swung inward, banging against the wall. Inside, the bar was dimly lit. A poker game was in progress at the back. 6 men sat around a table, smoke curling up from ashtrays. They jumped up, hands reaching for waistbands. "Don't," Lorenzo said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice cut through the room like a razor blade. The men froze. They recognized him. Everyone in the underworld recognized the scarred eyebrow and the bespoke suit. A heavy-set man with a red beard stepped forward. It was Connor, O'Malley's younger brother and his second-in-command. "Moretti!" Connor spat, though his eyes darted nervously to Rocco and the bat. "You're a long way from your penthouse. This is neutral ground. Neutral ground ends when your men touch what's mine," Lorenzo said, walking slowly towards the table. Connor frowned. "Yours? We haven't touched anything of yours. We were just collecting a debt from a waitress." Lorenzo stopped 2 feet from Connor. He stared down at the man with eyes devoid of humanity. "The waitress is mine. The girl is mine. The debt is cancelled." Connor laughed nervously. "That's not how it works, Lorenzo. That debt is on the books. O'Malley wants his money. Or he wants the collateral." "The collateral," Lorenzo repeated. "You mean the ledger?" The room went dead silent. Connor's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Liar," Lorenzo signaled to Rocco. Rocco stepped forward and slammed the baseball bat onto the poker table. Chips and cards flew everywhere. The sound was like a gunshot. "This bat belongs to one of your boys," Lorenzo said calmly. "He left it behind when he tried to crack a woman's skull open. I'm returning it." Lorenzo picked up the bat. He weighed it in his hands. "You tell Declan that if I see one of his men within 5 miles of Isabella or Sophie, I won't come here to talk. I will come here to burn this city until the only thing left of the O'Malley name is ash." "You're starting a war over a skirt?" Connor sneered, trying to regain his bravado. "Declan will skin you alive." Lorenzo moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He swung the bat, not at Connor's head, but at the whiskey shelf behind the bar. Glass exploded, raining down amber liquid and shards onto the floor. As Connor flinched, Lorenzo grabbed him by the throat and slammed him onto the wet, glass-covered bar top. "I'm not starting a war, Connor," Lorenzo whispered into his ear. "I'm ending one. Tell your brother I have the girl, and tell him that if he wants the ledger, he can come get it from me. Personally." Lorenzo released him. Connor gasped for air, clutching his throat. Lorenzo straightened his tie, turned, and walked out of the bar, the glass crunching under his dress shoes. Rocco and Leo followed, backing out slowly. Back in the SUV, the adrenaline faded, leaving Lorenzo with a cold, sinking realization. He had just claimed he had the ledger. He didn't. He had bluffed. If Bella didn't actually have the proof of O'Malley's drug trafficking, Lorenzo had just painted a target on his own back the size of Manhattan. "Boss," Rocco said from the front seat as they sped back towards the highway, "you just baited a shark." "Sharks are easy, Rocco," Lorenzo said, looking out the window at the passing streetlights. "You just have to be the bigger monster." But his mind wasn't on the war. It was on the blue eyes of a 6-year-old girl who had held his hand in the rain. He needed to get back to the estate. He had a feeling the hardest battle wasn't against O'Malley. It was going to be facing the woman he had just claimed as his own. 3 days passed. The Moretti estate, usually a place of silent, grim business, had transformed. The silence was broken by the sound of cartoons playing on the massive television in the living room and the patter of small feet. Bella was recovering. The swelling in her face had gone down, revealing high cheekbones and a soft, determined mouth. She walked with a limp, her ribs still taped, but she insisted on moving around. Lorenzo had tried to stay away. He spent his time in his study, buried in paperwork, orchestrating the construction on the waterfront and monitoring O'Malley's movements. But he found himself distracted. On the 4th morning, Lorenzo walked into the kitchen at 7 a.m., expecting his usual black coffee and silence. Instead, he found chaos. Flour was everywhere. On the counter, on the floor, on Rocco's black suit jacket, Sophie was sitting on the granite island, wearing one of Lorenzo's T-shirts that looked like a dress on her, whisking a bowl of batter with intense concentration. Bella was at the stove, flipping pancakes. Rocco, the 250-pound enforcer who could snap a neck with one hand, was currently holding a bottle of maple syrup and looking terrified of doing the wrong thing. "Good morning," Bella said, turning around. She froze when she saw Lorenzo. He was wearing grey sweatpants and a tight black T-shirt. It was the first time she had seen him out of a suit. The muscles in his arms were covered in tattoos, intricate ink sleeves that disappeared under his shirt. He looked less like a businessman and more like a warrior at rest. "What is this?" Lorenzo asked, eyeing the flour cloud. "Pancakes," Sophie cheered. "Mr. Rocco is helping. He's the syrup man." Lorenzo looked at Rocco. The bodyguard shrugged helplessly. She asked nicely, "Boss, what was I supposed to do?" A ghost of a smile touched Lorenzo's lips. It was a foreign sensation. "Carry on, syrup man." Lorenzo sat at the island. Sophie immediately scooted over to him. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not since that night in the rain. "Do you want chocolate chips?" Sophie asked seriously. "I don't eat sweets, Piccola," Lorenzo said. "You have to," she insisted. "It makes the grumpiness go away." Bella brought a plate over and set it in front of him. 3 pancakes loaded with chocolate chips. "She's right. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Eat." Lorenzo looked at Bella. Her bruises were fading to yellow and green. She looked domestic, warm, and utterly out of place in his cold, sterile kitchen. And yet, looking at her, he felt a hunger that had nothing to do with food. He picked up a fork and took a bite. It was sweet, cloying, and perfect. "So," Bella said, leaning against the counter, crossing her arms. The domestic mood shifted instantly. Her eyes were sharp. "Rocco told me you went to see O'Malley's men." Lorenzo stopped chewing. He shot a glare at Rocco. Rocco suddenly found a very interesting spot on the ceiling to look at. "I handled it," Lorenzo said. "You handled it? Or you started a war?" Bella asked. "I heard the guards talking. They're doubling the perimeter. You're expecting an attack." Lorenzo put the fork down. "Sophie, go with Rocco to watch cartoons. I need to speak to your sister." Sophie looked between them, sensing the tension, but hopped down. "Come on, syrup man." Rocco practically ran out of the room, grateful for the escape. When they were alone, Lorenzo stood up. He walked around the island until he was standing right in front of Bella. She had to crane her neck to look up at him. "You're safe here, Isabella. I told you that." "I don't want to be safe if it means you getting killed," she hissed. Why are you doing this? You don't know us." "I told O'Malley I have the ledger," Lorenzo said bluntly. Bella's face went white. She gripped the edge of the counter. "You... what?" "He thinks I have the proof of his drug trafficking. That's why he hasn't attacked yet. He's scared I'll release it to the feds or the commission. It bought us time." "But you don't have it," Bella cried. "I don't have it. It doesn't exist, Lorenzo. My father was a drunk and a gambler. He made up stories to feel important. There is no ledger." Lorenzo studied her face. She wasn't lying. She genuinely believed it didn't exist. "If there is no ledger," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register, "then we have a problem, because as long as O'Malley thinks there is one, he will hunt you. And if he finds out I was bluffing, he will come for all of us with everything he has." "Then let me go," she whispered. "I'll run. I'll take Sophie and disappear." "No." The word was absolute. Lorenzo reached out and cupped her face. His thumb grazed her cheekbone. His skin was rough. Hers was soft. "You aren't going anywhere," he said. "You're mine now, under my protection." "Is that all I am?" Bella asked, her breath hitching. "A project? A liability to be managed?" Lorenzo looked at her lips. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her against him and forget about the war outside. But he was a man of discipline. He pulled his hand away. "You are the only thing in this house that is real," he said. He turned to leave, but stopped at the doorway. "Search your things, Bella. Every toy, every box, every piece of paper your father left. Because if that ledger exists, we need to find it before O'Malley calls my bluff." 2 days later, the storm returned. Rain lashed against the bulletproof windows of the library, where Bella sat on the floor, surrounded by old boxes. Lorenzo had his men retrieve everything from her shabby apartment before O'Malley's goons could torch it. It wasn't much. Clothes, cheap dishes, and a few boxes of her father's belongings. She had been searching for hours. Nothing. Just tax returns, gambling receipts, and old photos of a happier time before her mother died. "It's not here," she muttered, throwing a stack of papers back into a box. Tears of frustration pricked her eyes. Lorenzo was risking his life for a ghost story. The door creaked open. Sophie walked in, dragging her feet. She was clutching her favorite toy, a raggedy, oversized teddy bear named Mr. Cuddles that was missing an eye and had been stitched up a dozen times. "Bella," Sophie whined, "I'm bored. The internet is down." Bella sighed, wiping her eyes. "I know, sweetie. The storm probably knocked it out." "Mr. Cuddles is hungry," Sophie said, shoving the bear into Bella's face. Bella managed a weak smile. She took the bear. It was heavy, surprisingly heavy. She frowned. She squeezed the bear's tummy. It crunched, not the soft crunch of stuffing, but the crinkle of paper and something hard. Bella's heart stopped. She looked at the bear. Then she looked at the haphazard stitching on the back seam. It was different thread, thicker, clumsier, like a man's sewing. "Sophie," Bella said, her voice trembling, "did Daddy ever fix Mr. Cuddles?" "Yeah," Sophie nodded, "before he went to sleep forever. He said Mr. Cuddles had a tummy ache, and he had to put medicine inside him. He said I had to keep Mr. Cuddles safe and never let the bad men take him." Bella felt the room spin. He hid it in the bear, the one thing Sophie never let out of her sight. "Sophie, I need to operate on Mr. Cuddles," Bella said urgently. She grabbed a letter opener from Lorenzo's desk and carefully cut the threads on the bear's back. She reached into the stuffing. Her fingers brushed against cold metal. She pulled it out. It was a flash drive, and wrapped around it was a small, leather-bound notebook. She opened the notebook. It was filled with dates, shipping container numbers, and payouts. Names were listed, politicians, police captains, and at the top of every page, Declan O'Malley. "Oh my God," Bella whispered. It was real. She stood up, clutching the evidence. She had to tell Lorenzo. But then a dark thought crept in. Lorenzo is a mob boss, too. He had been kind, yes. He had saved them. But what if he just wanted the Ledger to take over O'Malley's business? What if, once he had this, he didn't need Bella and Sophie anymore? Lorenzo was a predator. He had admitted it. Could she trust a wolf to guard a lamb? The library door opened. Bella jumped, hiding the notebook behind her back. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was Councilman Henderson, the sweaty man from the club that first night. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Henderson?" Bella asked, confused. "What are you doing here? Where is Lorenzo?" "Lorenzo is occupied," Henderson said smoothly, stepping into the room and closing the door. He held a silenced pistol in his hand. Bella gasped, pulling Sophie behind her. "Smart girl," Henderson said, eyeing her hand behind her back. "You found it, didn't you? The Ledger." "I don't know what you mean," Bella stammered, backing towards the desk. "Don't lie. I've been watching the cameras," Henderson said. "I work for Lorenzo, sure, but O'Malley pays better. And O'Malley promised me a seat in the Senate if I bring him the book." "You're the mole," Bella realized. "You told them we were here." "I told them how to get in," Henderson corrected. "The security system is down." "Not the storm. Me." Suddenly the lights in the mansion flickered and died. The emergency red lights bathed the room in a bloody glow. "Give me the book, Isabella," Henderson demanded, raising the gun. "And maybe I'll let the kid live." "No!" Sophie screamed. Bella's hand gripped the heavy marble paperweight on the desk behind her. "Lorenzo will kill you," she warned. "Lorenzo is dead," Henderson smirked. "O'Malley's hit squad is entering the West Wing right now. They're going to slaughter everyone." Boom. A massive explosion shook the house. The floor trembled. Henderson looked distracted for a split second. Bella didn't hesitate. She threw the marble paperweight with all her might. It struck Henderson in the shoulder. He grunted, the gun firing wildly into the ceiling. "Run, Sophie!" Bella screamed. She shoved Sophie towards the side door that led to the servants' quarters. "You bitch!" Henderson roared, switching the gun to his other hand. Bella tackled him. She was half his size, injured and terrified. But she was a big sister. And that made her dangerous. They crashed to the floor. Henderson struck her across the face with the gun. Bella saw stars, tasting blood. He pinned her down, the cold barrel of the gun pressing against her forehead. "Game over," Henderson snarled. Bang! The shot was deafening. Bella flinched, waiting for the darkness. But it was Henderson who went limp. He slumped over her, a hole in the center of his forehead. Bella pushed the heavy body off her, gasping for air. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the red emergency lights, was Lorenzo. He held a smoking gun. His shirt was torn, blood dripping from a cut on his arm. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He walked over, stepping over Henderson's body, and pulled Bella to her feet. He checked her quickly for wounds. "Did he hurt you?" Lorenzo asked, his voice shaking with rage. "No," Bella sobbed, clutching his shirt. He said you were dead." "It takes more than a few mercenaries to kill me," Lorenzo growled. "But they are inside the house. We have to move." "True." Bella pulled away and grabbed the notebook and flash drive from the floor where they had fallen. "I found it," she said, shoving them into his chest. "The ledger. It's real." Lorenzo looked at the book, then at her. He took it. "Keep it," he said, shoving it into her pocket. "What?" "I don't want it," Lorenzo said, reloading his gun. "I want you to survive. If we get separated, that book is your leverage. It's your life insurance." He grabbed her hand. "Where is Sophie?" "I sent her to the servants' passage." "Good, Rocco is there. He will get her to the safe room." Lorenzo looked at the door. Gunfire erupted in the hallway. "Stay behind me," Lorenzo commanded. "And don't close your eyes this time, Bella. I need you to see what I'm about to do to them." The hallway outside the library was a corridor of shadows and muzzle flashes. The emergency lights painted the walls in a strobing red, turning the smoke into a crimson fog. Lorenzo moved with a terrifying fluidity. He didn't just shoot, he dissected the space. He pulled Bella tight against his back, moving as one unit. Keep your head down, he ordered, his voice calm amidst the chaos. Two men in tactical gear rounded the corner. Before they could raise their rifles, Lorenzo fired twice. 2 clean shots. The men crumbled. They're professionals, Lorenzo noted, stepping over a body and retrieving a dropped rifle. Mercenaries. O'Malley spent a fortune on this. How do we get out? Bella asked, her ears ringing from the noise. We don't go out. We go down. The wine cellar has a tunnel that leads to the boathouse. Rocco knows the protocol. They reached the grand staircase. The foyer below was a war zone. Moretti's security team, men in black suits, were trading fire with O'Malley's mercenaries who had breached the front doors. Valuable vases shattered. The crystal chandelier sparkled as bullets chipped away at it. "We can't cross that!" Bella shouted over the roar of automatic fire. "We have to," Lorenzo said. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. "Do you trust me?" "Yes," she said, realizing with a jolt that she truly did. She would follow this man into hell. "Then run when I say run." Lorenzo leveled the captured rifle over the banister and laid down, suppressing fire, forcing the mercenaries below to scramble for cover. "Run!" They sprinted down the stairs, slipping on the debris and glass. A bullet whizzed past Bella's ear, embedding itself in the plaster. Lorenzo shielded her with his body, taking a graze to his shoulder without even flinching. They crashed through the heavy oak door leading to the kitchen. Silence. The kitchen was empty, save for the flour still dusting the floor from that morning's pancakes, a ghostly reminder of the peace they had lost. "Rocco," Lorenzo called out softly. "Here, boss," a strained voice replied from behind the pantry island. Rocco was sitting on the floor, his face pale. His suit was soaked in blood at the thigh. He had applied a tourniquet with his belt. Beside him, huddled in the corner, was Sophie. She was clutching the empty shell of Mr. Cuddles, her eyes wide with shock. When she saw Bella, she didn't scream. She just scrambled over and buried her face in Bella's stomach. "I got her here," Rocco grunted, trying to stand but failing. "But I took a hit. Artery is nicked, I think." Lorenzo knelt beside his oldest friend. He checked the tourniquet. It was tight, but Rocco was losing color fast. "You did good, Rocco," Lorenzo said, his voice thick with emotion. "Leave me, Enzo," Rocco wheezed, handing Lorenzo a fresh magazine for his pistol. "I can hold the door. You get them to the boat." "No," Sophie cried, turning to look at the big bodyguard. "No, Syrup Man comes too." Lorenzo looked at the door, then at Rocco. The sound of boots approaching the kitchen was getting louder. "I don't leave family behind," Lorenzo snarled. He grabbed Rocco's arm and hauled the massive man to his feet. "Bella, take his other side. Sophie, hold on to my belt and don't let go." Together they dragged Rocco toward the back service elevator that led to the cellar. It was slow. Too slow. The kitchen doors burst open just as the elevator doors were sliding shut. Bullets pinged against the metal, but they were moving down. Safety. For a moment. The cellar was cool and smelled of dust and vintage wine. Lorenzo led them to a false rack of Pinot Noir bottles. He pulled a specific bottle, and the entire shelf swung open, revealing a damp concrete tunnel. "Go," Lorenzo said, pushing them inside. "You're not coming?" Bella stopped, panic seizing her chest. Lorenzo reloaded his weapon. He stood at the entrance of the tunnel. "They are right behind us. If I don't collapse the entrance, they will follow us to the water. I need to shoot the support beams." "Lorenzo, no!" Bella grabbed his arm. "You'll be buried." "I'll run fast," he lied. He kissed her forehead. A hard, desperate press of lips. "Get Sophie to the boat. Start the engine. Wait 2 minutes. If I'm not there, go." He shoved her into the darkness and hit the switch to close the hidden door. "Enzo!" Bella screamed, pounding on the other side. "Go!" His muffled voice came through. Bella sobbed, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. She grabbed Rocco's weight and Sophie's hand. "Come on, we have to go." They stumbled through the dark tunnel, guided only by the dim emergency strips on the floor. It felt like miles. Finally, they burst out into the fresh, rainy air of the boathouse. A sleek speedboat sat in the water. Bella helped Rocco in, and then Sophie. She jumped into the driver's seat. She had never driven a boat, but she knew how to turn a key. The engine roared to life. "Wait," Sophie whispered, pointing at the tunnel exit. Boom! A dull explosion rocked the ground beneath the estate. Dust billowed out of the tunnel entrance. "Lorenzo," Bella whispered, her heart shattering. 1 minute passed. Rocco groaned in the back. "Bella, we have to go. They'll be on the docks in seconds." 2 minutes, Bella said fiercely. He said 2 minutes. 90 seconds. Gunfire erupted from the cliff above the boathouse. Bullets splashed into the water around them. "Bella!" Rocco yelled. "Just wait!" Then a figure emerged from the smoke of the tunnel. He was limping, covered in white dust, looking like a ghost. Lorenzo. He sprinted across the dock, diving into the water, just as the wooden planks where he had been standing exploded into splinters from machine gun fire. Bella screamed, reaching over the side. Lorenzo's hand broke the surface. She grabbed it. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, fueled by pure adrenaline, she hauled him towards the swim platform. He rolled into the boat, coughing up water and plaster. "Drive!" he roared. Bella slammed the throttle forward. The boat surged, the bow lifting into the air as they sped away from the burning estate, disappearing into the dark, rainy expanse of the Hudson River. Behind them, the flames from the mansion licked the sky, consuming the millions of dollars, the history, and the old life of Lorenzo Moretti. He didn't look back. He sat on the floor of the boat, holding Sophie tight, watching Bella steer them towards the dawn. 6 months later. The rain in Paris felt different than the rain in New York. In New York, the rain was angry. It beat against the pavement like it was trying to wash away sins that were too deep to scrub out. It smelled of ozone, garbage, and urgency. In Paris, specifically in this quiet, cobblestoned corner of the 4th arrondissement, the rain was gentle. It was a soft curtain that blurred the world, offering privacy rather than punishment. Isabella sat at a small wrought-iron table outside Le Petit Café, protected by a large canvas awning. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans, damp earth, and the faint, sweet scent of pastries drifting from the open door. She wrapped her wool coat tighter around herself, not from cold, but from a lingering habit of self-preservation that she hadn't quite shaken yet. On the table in front of her lay a copy of the International Herald Tribune. The headline was bold, black, and final. "O'Malley Crime Syndicate Dismantled, Mass Arrests in New York Corruption Scandal." She ran her finger over the newsprint. It had been the biggest RICO case in 2 decades. An anonymous package had been delivered to the FBI headquarters in Quantico, the offices of the New York Times, and Interpol simultaneously. It contained everything. The ledger Bella had found in the teddy bear, the digital backups from the flash drive, and audio recordings Lorenzo had secretly made of Councilman Henderson over the years. There was no wiggle room. No paid-off judges could suppress it. Declan O'Malley was currently in solitary confinement, awaiting a trial that would put him away for 3 lifetimes. His empire had crumbled overnight, stripped for parts by the feds and rival gangs. But there was another story on page 4, a smaller obituary that made Bella's chest ache every time she read it. Lorenzo Moretti, 32, suspected mob boss, presumed dead in Palisades estate fire. The official report stated that the fire, caused by a gas line explosion during a gangland dispute, had reached temperatures so high that dental records were impossible to verify. The police found remains. They assumed it was the master of the house. The case was closed. The King of New York was dead. Bella took a sip of her cappuccino, the foam sticking to her lip. She looked up as the bell above the cafe door jingled. A man stepped out, shaking a wet umbrella. He didn't wear Italian silk suits anymore. He wore dark denim jeans, scuffed leather boots, and a charcoal wool peacoat that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His hair was longer, slightly messy, curling at the collar in a way the old Lorenzo never would have permitted. The scar on his eyebrow was still there, a jagged white line bisecting the dark hair, but the hardness in his eyes, that cold, dead look of a man who expected betrayal from every shadow, was gone. In his left hand, he held the hand of a little girl. Sophie was wearing a bright yellow raincoat and matching galoshes, looking like a little duckling waddling through the puddles. She was laughing, her head thrown back, pointing at a pigeon that was fighting over a crumb near the gutter. "Look, Papa, he's winning!" Sophie chirped, her voice carrying over the gentle patter of rain. Lorenzo Moretti, or Luca, as he was now known to their neighbors, smiled down at her. It wasn't the guarded smirk he used to give in the boardroom of the Onyx. It was genuine. It reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Pigeons are ruthless, Piccola," he said, his voice a low rumble that still sent a shiver down Bella's spine. "They are the mobsters of the bird world." "Do they have guns?" Sophie asked seriously, her eyes wide. "No," Lorenzo chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Just very aggressive beaks and a bad attitude." They walked over to the table. Lorenzo leaned down and kissed Bella on the cheek. His lips were cool from the rain, but his breath was warm against her skin. "Did you get it?" Bella asked, folding the newspaper so the headline about O'Malley was hidden. She didn't want darkness at their table, not today. "Hot chocolate with extra whipped cream," Lorenzo said, nodding to the waiter who was following them with a tray. "And I may have been coerced into buying a pain au chocolat." "Coerced?" Bella raised an eyebrow at Sophie, who was trying to look innocent. "It was a negotiation," Sophie insisted, climbing onto the chair next to Bella. "I told him if I didn't get the pastry, I would tell you he let me jump in 3 puddles. It was leverage." "She learns too fast," Lorenzo sighed, sitting down opposite them. He winced slightly as he adjusted his leg. The limp was subtle now, but on rainy days, the ache in his hip from the tunnel collapse was a reminder of the price he had paid. "Are you okay?" Bella asked softly, her hand finding his across the table. "I'm fine," Lorenzo said, and for the first time in his life, he meant it. He looked at Bella, really looked at her. 6 months ago, she was a bruised waitress, trembling in his office, smelling of cheap diner grease and fear. Now she was radiant. Her hair was loose and healthy, her skin glowing. She was studying art history at the Sorbonne, a dream she had buried when her father got sick, and the debts piled up. "I saw you reading the paper," Lorenzo said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "They caught the last of them," Bella whispered. "Connor O'Malley was arrested in Boston this morning. It's over, Lorenzo. It's really over." Lorenzo stared at the steam rising from his black coffee. "It's never fully over, Bella. You know that. Men like me, we leave shadows. Sometimes they stretch long." "You aren't a man like that anymore," she said fiercely. "I was," he countered gently. "I did terrible things. Building bakeries and funding orphanages now doesn't erase the blood on these hands." "No," Bella agreed. "It doesn't erase it, but it balances the scale. You saved us. You gave up a kingdom for a girl who interrupted your meeting." "I didn't give up anything I wanted to keep," Lorenzo said. He looked at Sophie, who was currently wearing a mustache of whipped cream and trying to feed a piece of pastry to her toy bear, the new Mr. Cuddles. "Rocco called," Lorenzo added, changing the subject. "How is he?" "Complaining about the French cheese. He says it smells like feet wrapped in sadness. But he's safe. The doctors in Zurich say his leg is fully healed. He'll be joining us for Christmas." Bella smiled. "Good. Sophie misses her syrup, man." Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, the tension that had defined his posture for a decade finally absent. He looked at the street, at the people walking by who had no idea they were sitting next to a ghost. He thought about the night of the fire, the heat, the crushing weight of the ceiling, the moment he thought he wouldn't make it to the water. He remembered the feeling of drowning, the blackness closing in, and then Bella's hand, that small, fragile hand gripping his wrist with the strength of a Valkyrie, pulling him back to the surface. He had spent his life believing power came from fear, that loyalty was bought, that love was a liability to be cut loose. He looked at Sophie, giggling as she kicked her feet. He looked at Bella, looking at him with eyes full of a quiet, steady love. He realized he had been the poorest man in New York. "What are you thinking about?" Bella asked, tilting her head. Lorenzo took a sip of his coffee. "I'm thinking that the news is wrong." "Wrong? The paper says Lorenzo Moretti lost everything," he said, gesturing to the table, to the rain, to them. "It says I died with nothing but ashes to my name. But looking at you, I think I pulled off the greatest heist in history." Bella laughed, a sound that was bright and free. "You're arrogant." "I'm accurate," he smirked. Sophie suddenly tugged on his sleeve. "Papa, the rain stopped. The swings are dry now." "You promised to push me to the sky!" Lorenzo groaned theatrically, but stood up. He offered his hand to Bella. "Coming, my love?" Bella took his hand. It was scarred, rough, and strong. It was the hand that had held a gun to save her life, and the hand that now held hers to guide her through it. "Always," she said. They walked away from the cafe, leaving the newspaper on the table. The wind picked up, fluttering the pages. The obituary of the Mafia boss was covered by the sports section. Lorenzo Moretti was dead. Luca, the father and husband, walked down the wet street, chasing a little girl in yellow boots toward the park, finally, truly free. And that is the story of how a 6-year-old girl melted the heart of the most dangerous man in New York. Lorenzo Moretti lost his empire, his home, and his name. But he gained something worth more than all the dirty money in the world. A family. It makes you wonder, if you were in his shoes, would you have burned it all down for a stranger? Or would you have handed over the ledger to keep your power? This story reminds us that even in the darkest souls, there is a spark of light waiting for the right person to ignite it. Sometimes, the hero isn't the knight in shining armor. Sometimes, it's the villain who decides to change the story. If you enjoyed this twists and turns Mafia romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Lorenzo should have kept the money, or did he make the right choice? I'll see you in the next video.